Hello, everyone, and good evening. I'm Amelia Stevenson, one of Greenville Women Giving's co-chairs, and welcome to our very first education session of the year. As most of you know, our Education Committee plans a series of 5 sessions annually. Each focuses on one of Greenville Women Giving's funding areas: arts, education, environment, health, and human services. These programs bring us information on current topics and serve to broaden our knowledge of our Greenville community. Tonight, our series begins with the environment, specifically a look at emergency flooding through the eyes of 3 panelists. But before we proceed, some technical announcements. First, your computer has been put on mute. Please keep it that way so that we avoid any unnecessary and unwanted audio interference. Second, we will have a question and answer time after all of the speakers complete their presentations. We will be using Zoom's question and answer feature for that. So if you have a question, go to the bottom of your screen and look for the Q&A button. Type in your question and click send. If you wish to have a particular speaker answer your question, you may indicate that. We have found this to be more effective than the chat feature, so please limit yourself to the Q&A feature. Jenny Mitchell will be on hand to manage the questions after the presentations. Third, we've prepared for this Zoom program as best we know how. However, there's always a chance that something can go wrong technically. If we do have a glitch, please give us a few minutes to get back on track. And if it's something that we cannot rectify, we'll sign off. And within 24 hours, you will receive an email with a link to a recorded version of this program. Okay, now a few thank yous. Our partners: Brand in Motion Creative Services, Details Public Relations, and Town. We could not do this without your support. Thank you. And a big shout out to Tommy Reese and the Education Committee. They have had to reinvent the wheel to bring us from in-person programming to this virtual format. Ladies, y'all have done an outstanding job, and we can't thank you enough. And now I'm going to turn this over to Jenny Mitchell, who will introduce our presenters.
Hello, my name is Jenny Mitchell, and I, along with Susan Robbins, coordinated this evening's program, Spotlight on Environment Emergency Flooding. Our guest speakers will present a program on how to prepare for flooding and what to expect from flooding and the effects on our wastewater and waterways. We have 3 very knowledgeable speakers this evening: Graham Rich, the Chief Executive Officer of Renewable Water Resources, or ReWa, as it is commonly known here in Greenville County; Lisa Colby, the Executive Director of the Upstate chapter of the American Red Cross; and Jessica Stumpf, the Greenville County Emergency Management Deputy Director. To learn more about our guest speakers and their careers, please refer to this evening's program emailed to you from Greenville Women Giving, along with the link to this meeting. Each speaker has prepared a pre-recorded program as relates to our topic and will be standing by to answer a few questions at the end of the presentations. As Amelia noted, please direct any questions to me and the Zoom Q&A. We will start this evening's speaker portion with a short video from ReWa, followed by Graham Rich, then Lisa Colby, and thirdly, Jessica Stumpf. However, after Lisa Colby, there will be a 60-second break to allow Jessica Stumpf's video to load. I will see you at the end of the presentations. Roll tape.
Good afternoon. My name is Graham Rich, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Renewable Water Resources, or ReWa, located here in Greenville County, South Carolina. As the CEO of this organization, I'm responsible for the day-to-day operation and management of this organization, and it provides water and wastewater services to about 400,000 people in the Upstate area that cover parts of 4 counties. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about our industry and the problems that we have when we have flooding or torrential rains. A little bit of background about myself. I've been in the water and wastewater industry for 36 years. Worked for 7 different utilities, and I've seen a lot of different natural events occur. I've been through hurricanes, been through tornadoes, I've been through floods, been through ice storms, hot weather, 113 degrees Fahrenheit, cold weather, minus 22 degrees Fahrenheit. And so I've seen a lot in my 36 years, and one of the things that we are very proud of in our industry is the delivery of our service. As you know, a lot of times when there's an ice storm or there's a hurricane or tornado, a lot of essential services are out of commission for a number of days, if not weeks. One thing about the water and wastewater industry is that we're pretty resilient, and sadly we've had to learn that the hard way. And we've learned a lot over the past 20, 25 years, and even longer than that, really since Hugo, on how to be resilient and how to be prepared for natural emergencies. Today I'm talking about flooding, and that's kind of appropriate given the variability of the climate that we've seen over the past 5 years. We've had very, very wet spells, and we've also had very, very dry spells. Our service is dependent on us being able to get to certain facilities. We own 9 wastewater treatment facilities. We own over 70 pump stations, and these are scattered throughout portions of the 5 counties that we're in. And so a lot of times during wet weather, the first thing that you worry about is loss of power. Now, most of our facilities have full generating capacity, backup generating capacity, so that if we do lose power, we have generators that are supposed to kick on. But like anything else, even though we do test them periodically, sometimes they don't act as they're supposed to. One other thing about wastewater service is that, different than water lines, we tend to follow natural drainage ways. We design things to try to flow by gravity, so we don't have to pump. We only pump when we absolutely have to. And so in order to be able to do that, our facilities are typically located in low-lying areas. And obviously the problems of maintaining and operating those are exacerbated when we do get heavy rains and flooding occurs. Not only in terms of inundating our facilities, but also gaining access to particularly pump stations. In a lot of cases, the floods will wash out roads, and we have no way to access it. And so really making sure that the facilities are running are probably our number one concern. Now, we do monitor all of our facilities 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. We have remote monitoring systems, and we have people that are on call 24 hours a day. And so when there is a problem with a loss of power, when there is a problem of flooding, we are notified, and we're able to react pretty quickly to determine, assess what the problem is, and then hopefully be able to fix it. One of the things that has made it a little bit more difficult, probably over the past 5 or 10 years, is the extreme weather events that we've had. And it seems that we're either receiving torrential rains, high-intensity rain events or high-intensity rain events that occur over a prolonged period of time. And so when that happens, it again is difficult to get out and make sure that all the facilities are operating properly. And to the extent that we can, if we don't lose signal, we can monitor that remotely and dispatch people as needed. One of the big things that happens when we do get flooding and high intensity rain events is that we have a problem that's called infiltration and inflow, which is rainwater getting into our sewer lines and overwhelming our sewer conveyance system and having pump stations overflow or manholes overflow. The problem with that, obviously, is you're having raw sewage exit into the environment. And if manhole lids are exposed due to the pressure, then as the rivers rise, then they continue to compound that problem because there's a chance then that they can actually rise above the top of the manhole lid and actually start inflowing into the sewer system. And I'll give an example of this. On February the 6th, we did not have overall a very heavy rain event. It was a very highly intense rain event. I think over a 24-hour period, we had almost 6 inches of rain. Our largest treatment plant is located on Malden Road, called the Malden Road Treatment Facility. Typically, on any day, we treat about 16 million gallons per day. And that takes into account wet weather and dry weather. And obviously with dry weather, there's less flow. With wet weather, there's more flow. But on average, we treat about 16 million gallons per day. On that day, with the 5.9-inch rain event, we measured 93 million gallons of water going through our treatment plant. Keep in mind, this plant's only permitted to treat 29 million gallons per day. So you can see the impact of rainwater getting into our sewer conveyance system and transporting that down to our treatment plants. And that obviously causes problems to be able to handle that much water. We also worry about our compliance issues with our treatment facility. And in a lot of cases, the system is so overloaded that a lot of the wastewater never makes it down to the treatment facilities. The manhole lids overflow or the pump stations overflow due to the fact that the pumps just can't keep up with the amount of rainwater that's getting into them. We have embarked on a 20-year plan to reduce that so that we do not have overflows. And we started that 2 years ago. And it will be a significant undertaking, given the fact that we will have to coordinate with 16 other sewer providers within our service area to make sure that they're doing the things they need to fix their pipes. And so obviously power and rainwater are the two biggest issues that we have to deal with, but there are other issues that we deal with as well. And some of those can be safety hazards, particularly when there's flooding and they're down power lines or things like that with our employees being out and about in the field. And so we have to take special precautions to make sure that we're keeping our employees safe and that we're not exposing them to any hazardous conditions. I've talked primarily about the wastewater system. Water systems typically are not as impacted by flood events other than the issues with water quality going into their treatment facilities. Sometimes they'll lose some facilities due to flooding, pump stations and the like, but typically they don't have near the number of problems that wastewater systems do, simply because we are more often than not located in very low-lying areas that are susceptible to flooding. Now, over the past 20 years, we've taken additional precautions to continue to make our systems more resilient by putting switch gears and control panels out of the floodplain so that if some of the assets are flooded, at least the power controls and things like that hopefully do not become flooded. And so in designing facilities today, we take into account the issue of resilience and reliability far more serious than we did, say, 20 or 30 years ago. And so that's one of the reasons that we're able to continue to operate even during some of the worst flooding events on it. I like to remember a time when I was working for the city of Little Rock in Arkansas, and we were getting ready to have an ice and snow event there, and the energy provider got up before city council and said, you know, please expect there to be possible power outages up to 2 weeks. Well, we've never had any kind of outage like that here or on the water system. We expect that there are problems to get the problems resolved within hours, not days or weeks. And again, I think that speaks to the level of attention that we give to emergency preparedness, the level of attention that we give to making sure that we have redundancies in our system and that we are constantly monitoring the system so that when we do have flooding events that we're able to quickly react to those and be able to jump into action and get the problems resolved. And so that is kind of my spiel on operation of a water and wastewater system during flooding events. It's been a pleasure to be here today, and thank you very much for your time.
Hi, everybody. My name, as the screen said, my name is Lisa Colby. I'm the Executive Director of the Upstate chapter of the American Red Cross. I've been with the Red Cross for about 3.5 years, and I'm so glad to be here with you today. Congratulations, first and foremost, on your amazing organization and all of the past grant making that you've done for our community. And I wanted to thank you for what you've done to truly strengthen the nonprofit community in Greenville. It's amazing what a group of women who are committed and passionate can do when they get together. The Red Cross mission is to prevent and alleviate human suffering in the face of emergencies using the power of our volunteers and the generosity of our donors. So I'm really honored to be involved in your education session today. And I wanted to just take a minute and let you know that about 30 South Carolina volunteers, Red Cross volunteers who are trained in disaster, are responding right now at the time of this video to the devastation that's happening in Louisiana. So please keep them in your thoughts and prayers. They're dealing with exactly what we're going to talk about, which is the effects of flooding and the disaster that happened due to Hurricane Laura. So I'll go ahead and get the PowerPoint started, if you would please. Okay. We are lucky to be here in the Upstate where we don't feel the effects so much of hurricanes like the Low Country does. But you know, with climate change, flooding is going to be something that we are probably all going to be dealing with, a reality for many. I don't know if you all saw, but in the news, the mayor of Charleston recently was saying he reported that the city of Charleston flooded 89 times last year, 89 times of some form of flood happening in the city of Charleston. And by the year 2050, it's estimated that flooding will happen possibly every day in the city. So this is something that it's very timely and very important that we have a plan and that you know what to do and you know the effects and how to stay safe from flooding. So next slide, please. So flooding is the most frequent natural disaster that happens in the country and that Red Cross deals with. That's natural disaster. Fires, which I guess we consider man-made, we respond the number of times more to fires, especially home fires, But in terms of natural disasters, it's flooding. And various situations can trigger flooding situations. Obviously, hurricanes can bring heavy rains and storm surge. The winds of hurricanes, when you hear about category 4 or 5, the wind is what gets all the attention and determines the category, but it's actually the water, the flooding and the storm surge that causes the real long-lasting devastation to communities. Obviously, rapidly melting snow can overwhelm rivers and cause flooding. There can be extended periods of rain or sudden and intense rainfall, and that's probably what we see the most of here in Greenville. And then dams and levees can fail too, as we saw with the devastating effects of Katrina, but also in other communities. Flooding can also result when structures that are built to contain or control a lot of water, so think of reservoirs and things like that, when those are overrun due to storms. And that's something that every community has, is large stores of water. Next slide, please. So it's important to know the difference between the different kinds of flood alerts. Floodwaters they can rise very rapidly, leaving little time for you to react or get to a safe place. And so your safety depends on understanding floods and staying informed about the conditions. So the weather forecasters use these terms, flood watch, flood warning, and flash flood warning, to describe flooding potential. So it's really knowing the difference between a watch and a warning. So a flood watch, if you hit the next slide, or the next, there you go, a slide. The flood watch means that flooding's possible. So just be prepared, stay tuned, but nothing's happening yet. So the next one is the warning. A flood warning means that it's actually occurring or it's about to occur. And that's when you really need to take action and have your plan kick into place. And then flash flood warning is the same thing. It's much like tornadoes. You can have tornado watches and tornado warnings, and it's important to know the difference between each of those and act accordingly. Next slide. So flood risks. Floodwaters can be really powerful, and every year in the United States, a flood kills about 93 people are killed in floods and cause billions of dollars worth of damage. So rising waters can damage land, building, roads, property, and just 6 inches of fast moving water can knock down an adult, and 12 inches can sweep away most cars. So aside from the immediate dangers of the floodwater, they also leave behind additional risks, which are that the flood areas, it's devastating. If you've ever been to a community that's had a flood, it's walls of mud, silt, debris, anything that's knocked over or floating around in that water can end up in your home or hurting people. It can trigger landslides, mudslides, and not to mention all of the contaminated and hazardous materials that are caught up in that water, untreated sewage, fluid, fuel, pesticides, all those things can end up in the water. It also, people end up with infections from having been exposed to floodwaters. And then probably most insidious is mold. So mold can make you sick. It can really damage property in a long-term sense. So one thing a lot of people don't know is that after a property is flooded or a building is flooded, mold can appear as quickly as within 24 to 48 hours, and it continues to grow until steps are taken to completely eliminate the source of that moisture and deal with the problem. So like in Louisiana right now, the conditions are hot and humid, and that mold growth is just actually, it's a real problem and something that is hard to deal with. Next slide. So safety, what can you do? How can you plan and how can you prepare? We like to say there's really 3 steps here at Red Cross. We say make a kit, have a plan, and stay informed. And that's what these steps are. So these are the things that you can do before a flood actually threatens. And we hope that you'll have your household ready and take the steps to prepare for it, and collect essential disaster supplies ahead of time. Create a disaster plan for your house, and then be informed about what's going on and about preparedness in general. Older adults are especially more vulnerable. So if you're either an older person yourself, or if you have them in your family, there's been some research done recently that says that they're much more vulnerable due to access issues, functional needs, needing medications and things like that. So, you know, if you have someone in your household that has these issues, please make sure that you discuss your plans ahead of time with them. Have supplies of prescription medications available and, you know, around in a secure location, or copies of those prescriptions, as well as the dosage and list of allergies, you know, the things that we all need to stay healthy, were we to have to evacuate or be away from our home for any length of time. So you want to make a kit, a disaster kit, and there's a website, the Red Cross website, which I'll show at the end of this presentation. It shows exactly what to put in a disaster kit to keep you safe. So we'll go over that, and it has everything, you know, that you need to consider. And you also need to tailor your plan for if you have any pets in your household. So what will you do with pets if you are having to leave your home, or if you can't get back into your home? And then somebody from emergency management, one of my friends, will be doing one of the presentations, and she'll hopefully be talking to you about making sure that you know your community's evacuation plan, or how to make sure that you're informed about what elected officials, what the management, the public safety people are saying about where to go, what routes to take out of town, where the hazards are, things like that. And then know where you're going to meet up with your family members of your household if you get separated. Know where you might stay if you have to evacuate. These are the kinds of things you want to think about ahead of time. And finally, you want to have important documents such as your insurance policies or your birth certificates, valuable things like that. You know, these days we can easily take a picture or scan and upload them to a website so that you always have them easily accessible. And there's also a lot of things you can do to make sure that you get informed about whether there is a flood watch or warning in effect. One of them is Code Red, which you can sign up on the emergency management website. And another one is downloading the American Red Cross emergency app on your phone. And that will keep you informed as well. Next slide, please. So when a flood is predicted, it's really important to follow all evacuation orders, to evacuate quickly, to continue to monitor your radio or your TV or your phone for updates. Bring your pets indoors. Make sure you have your secured documents. And then if you have time, you can do things like fill bottles for clean water so that you have water. Make sure your gas tank is filled. Turn off any propane tanks and unplug small appliances. And then if you have time and you think your house is going to be flooded, then you go to the next step, which is to move furniture and valuables to higher ground and to higher floors inside your home, and then turn off utilities if you're ordered to do so by your authorities. Next slide. During a flood, get to higher ground is very important. Stay away from underpasses, dips, low spots, washes, riverbanks, things like that. Remember what I said before is that just 12 inches can knock a car over, and only 6 can knock over a person. So our catchphrase is turn around and don't drown. It's almost impossible to determine how deep the water is, especially at night, but you just can't tell on a roadway how deep it is. So you know, be very careful and do not drive through flooded streets. Next slide, please. After a flood, it's important to let everybody know if your area was flooded. Let your family members know that you're safe so they don't come looking for you. Stay out of a building that has water around it. Don't walk around on a sagging floor that could collapse. Critters tend to come out after floods, so watch for rodents, snakes, spiders, things like that. And if your house has been flooded, immediately open the windows and try and get some fresh air to dry things out. It's important to quickly deal with that mold situation I talked about before. Again, if you're unsure of what the water situation is, or if it's been contaminated, make sure you drink bottled water. You're going to need to check your refrigerator for food spoilage. Pay attention to how your loved ones are handling the stress and offer them assistance. Next slide, please. And then the steps to recovery. Downed power lines can be very scary. Make sure you're wearing protective gear. Use a flashlight, not candles. Leave immediately if you smell any gas. Gas leaks are particularly dangerous in these situations. And if you had to evacuate, make sure it's safe to return. Make sure the authorities are telling you that it's okay to come back to your house. And then finally, if you get to your home, you're going to want to use protective gear, gloves, boots, things like that before you start any kind of cleanup process. If you have a generator, be very familiar and very careful with all of the operating instructions. So after a storm, and this, I don't know if you heard the news, but this happened in Louisiana. Half of the deaths that happened after that hurricane were not because of the wind or the floods. They were because of carbon monoxide poisoning, and electrocutions and fires happen after those kinds of storms too. Next slide. And there are things you can do to protect your home now to make sure that you are safe and that your property is protected should it become flooded. So you want to make sure, you want to find out, do you live in a floodplain? You can take out additional insurance to make sure that you are covered in the flood. Not all homeowners insurance covers it. So you need to see what your coverage levels are. And if you're in a floodplain, certainly you're going to want to make sure that you're covered for that. There are some other things you can do around your home. You can raise your furnace and your water heater and your electrical panels to make sure that they're less likely to get damaged should there be a flood. And you want to seal walls in your basements with waterproofing compounds. That's something else you can do that can really have a good protective effect. And you want to know how to shut off your gas should something like that happen, and keep a wrench handy for that purpose. And what I wanted to do now is go ahead and show you a lot of, if you can't remember anything that we talked about on this presentation, there is all the information you might need to know at the Red Cross website, and it's redcross.org/flood. And if you go to that website, you'll see, and I think Melanie's going to pull it up in just a minute. There it comes. So everything we talked about, including what to do before a flood, during a flood, and how to recover from a flood. What you can put in an emergency kit, how to protect your family. It's really easy to navigate this part of our website. How to help your pets, what to do to keep pets safe, some of the hazards that are out there, and then how to clean up afterwards, the things you might be able to do yourself and the things you might need a professional to do. And again, there's the emergency app information. The app is really great too, because one thing it allows you to do is put in information about where all your loved ones are. So if you have children away at college, or if you have family members in different parts of the country, this is a free app, and I have it on my phone, and it lets me know I have family out on the West Coast, and I've been kept up to date about all of the fire situation that's happening there. And it's like an extra level of security so that the rest of your family members are safe. But it also, if you remember back in the springtime here in Greenville, we had, or in Greenville County, we had tornadoes. And so I got those tornado warnings right away and was able to, for the first time ever, I've had to do this since I've lived in Greenville. I brought my family into our safe place because it actually showed me how close those tornadoes were to our neighborhood. So I highly recommend you download that app. So I hope that you were able to learn a little bit more about Red Cross services and the things we do to help people prevent disasters and to respond to them when they do happen. So with that, I will conclude, and thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jessica Stumpf, and I'm the Deputy Director of Emergency Management for Greenville County. And I just want to say thank you for allowing me to speak with you all today regarding emergency flooding. But before we kind of get into that, I want to talk a little bit about what emergency management actually is, and then we'll dive into a little bit of the emergency flooding situation. We'll talk about some events that have happened here in Greenville County, especially over the last year. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here and begin a PowerPoint presentation for you all to see. So we'll talk about emergency flooding and what to do. A little bit about emergency management. Myself, I have been with Greenville County Emergency Management since 2017, the beginning of 2017. I actually joined as a planning coordinator, which meant I was in charge of all of our emergency plans, and I also took on some of the public information duties. Prior to that, I worked for the South Carolina Emergency Management Division, both in the recovery section as well as the preparedness section, worked through the historic flood emergency in 2015, as well as Hurricane Matthew in 2016. So I've had to deal with a lot of flooding issues over the last 4 to 5 years. So emergency management is the function that's charged with creating the framework in which communities try to reduce their vulnerability to hazards and try to cope with disasters. And what we're trying to do in emergency management is to promote a safer, less vulnerable community with the capacity to cope with those hazards and disasters. A lot of people ask me, can you just sum it up real quick, what emergency management is? And I tell people we're a coordinating agency. So we coordinate people, we coordinate resources, and we coordinate information. There are 4 phases of emergency management, and these phases, they are going on all the time. We have preparedness, which is those actions that are taken to prepare for an emergency or a disaster. We talk about plans, we talk about training and exercise, getting ready for those events to happen. In terms of response, top priorities are the life safety, incident stabilization, property preservation. This might also include evacuations and sheltering and things like that. Recovery is the longest and most expensive phase of emergency management. We're still dealing with flooding that we had earlier this year, so there's still a recovery process, and also tornadoes. We had tornadoes this year too, so still dealing with the recovery process of both of those. But these are the actions that are taken after an emergency to restore and resume normal operations. So economic recovery, debris management, housing, health and social services. And then we have mitigation. And this is the effort to reduce the effects or risks associated with hazards. And this is public education, hazard and vulnerability assessment, and improved infrastructure. So when a disaster or an emergency happens, just like flooding, you want to try to build back better so that the next time this happens, it won't be as bad. So these are the 4 phases of emergency management, and they are constantly ongoing. So this is a look at the Greenville County Emergency Operations Center. We are located in the basement of Greenville City Hall, and this is the place where everyone comes together. This includes government, private sector companies. This is where we coordinate the response to any disaster or emergency. The bottom picture there is actually from the solar eclipse back in 2017. We did activate for that, and we had a pretty full room of people that day preparing for the influx of people that were going to be coming into town, but also the potential for any emergency situations to happen, especially when you have a lot of people congregating in several locations throughout the county waiting to see that eclipse. So we have an alternate emergency operations center and a mobile command post that we can work out of as well. We operate under 3 operational conditions. OPCON 3 is what we call our no expectation of activating. We're still training, we're planning, we're coordinating, and we're monitoring what's going on throughout the county. OPCON 2, we have this enhanced level of awareness, and it's possible that a disaster or an emergency is likely to affect the county. We may partially activate our emergency operations center if necessary, and we've selected some emergency support functions that are helping us in the EOC, and this is the point at which our emergency operations plan may be implemented. Due to COVID-19, we are still currently at operational condition 2. And OPCON 1 is full alert. This means a disaster is imminent or it's occurring. We have our Emergency Operations Center fully activated. County response team personnel are activated or they're ready to deploy, and our emergency support functions are coordinating and they have a presence in the Emergency Operations Center. Emergency support functions are county agencies and organizations that are tasked with a specific role in disaster response and recovery. It can be anything from public works to engineering to fire to law enforcement to medical, sheltering. All those things have to be covered when we're dealing with a disaster. There's a couple of things we have to look at when we start planning for these potential disasters, including flooding. We have to look at our vulnerability. And this is a document from the U.S. Census Bureau. And I know it says County COVID-19 Impact Planning Report, but this really applies to all disasters and emergencies. So we want to look at, what population or percentage of the population in the county is aging that are 65 and older. Are they going to need help getting to a safer place? We're looking at, those who might have insurance. We're looking at a lot of different factors, at-risk population. How many households have a disability? How many households have somebody that are 65 and older? How many households don't have a vehicle that could impact them being able to evacuate their homes if necessary? So we're looking at a lot of things. And I know on here it says the total population of Greenville County, 498,000, but the Census Bureau does estimate as of 2019, we're up to 523,542 residents in the county. So our county is growing rapidly, and this is something that we have to account for when we're talking about vulnerability and risk. A couple of other things we look at is what is the percentage of our Spanish-speaking population, and how do we go ahead and get messaging out to them? We look at the poverty rate. So there's a lot of things that we have to take into consideration when we start planning for emergencies and disasters. So we have a lot of hazards that we have to face here in Greenville County, and we have to plan for all of these hazards. So some of those include droughts, earthquakes. Some of you may have felt that earthquake in North Carolina not too long ago. We have to deal with fires, both structural and wildfires. Tropical systems do also impact the county. That's one of the things that could cause flooding here in Greenville County. We're dealing with COVID-19 in terms of the infectious disease and outbreak, public health emergency, and then we've got severe thunderstorms, tornadoes, lightning, severe winter weather. We're known for getting some ice storms here in Greenville County, active shooter events, civil disturbances, hazardous materials spills or releases, radiological release. We're not too far from the Oconee Nuclear Station, terrorism and cyber terrorism, pipelines, and also landslides. So we've got a lot of things to deal with, but flooding is one of those issues that we do deal with a lot here in Greenville County. We kind of focus on four main flooding issues. Dam and levee failure, local drainage problems. You see anytime you get a real heavy rain within a short period of time, you'll start to see some of those local drainage issues. Flash flooding, which means the water is rising very quickly, and then riverine flooding. So we have to deal with a lot of these, and we've had a couple of these events already this year. So let's take a look back a little bit in history. So July 29th, 2004, you're looking at the Reedy River in downtown Greenville. This was a record flash flooding event for Greenville County and the city of Greenville, and this was due to a stationary thunderstorm that just sat over the same place, and it dropped a lot of rain in 4 hours. About 4 to 9 inches of rain fell in about a 4-hour period in the headwaters of the Reedy River. Downstream into downtown Greenville, the river rose to 19.2 feet. That's the second highest level on record. Miraculously, there were no serious injuries or deaths that occurred with this, but 75 people had to be rescued because of the flooding. 30 homes were destroyed. Another 100 sustained significant damage. The property damage at the end of this event was about $3.5 million. Roads and bridges infrastructure damage was about $5.8 million. So these events tend to cost a lot of money when they do occur. And there's been several over the years. I can't even touch on all of them. But we're going to fast forward a little bit and look at what happened here in February. So these pictures from February, the beginning of February, this is flooding from the Saluda River. So this is on the western side of Greenville County, and this is a neighborhood that was essentially cut off because of flooding from the Saluda River. During this event, we also had to deal with some severe thunderstorms. We had tornado warnings during this event. And a couple of days after this, it actually snowed. So we kind of got our fix of a lot of weather there in a short period of time. Because of this event that occurred, several things happened during it. This was the first time a flash flood emergency was issued by the National Weather Service in Greenville County. And a flash flood emergency is an elevated warning. So you have flash flood watch, which means watch out, flooding may occur. You have a flash flood warning, which means flooding is occurring or imminent and water is rising very quickly. A flash flood emergency means there is a serious threat to life and property, and everyone needs to get to higher ground immediately. So this is issued, it's coordinated between the National Weather Service and County Emergency Management, and because of how quickly the water was rising, both on the Saluda and on the Reedy River, and we had school in session downtown, kids were just getting released from school, we went ahead and coordinated that issuing of the flash flood emergency. And you'll get that alert over your phone via a wireless emergency alert system. It'll come across your phone and tell you to get to higher ground. Also, because of this flooding incident, we did receive a presidential disaster declaration for public assistance, which means infrastructure. We had over $1 million in road and bridge damage just from this event alone. A lot of our river gauges and rain gauges in the county were also damaged because of this event. So we'll fast forward to May of 2020, we had another flooding event. This one didn't have as much road and bridge damage and as the one in February did. But again, this is a look at the Reedy River, and I'm just going to kind of play this for you as I talk. But you're looking at downtown Greenville, and the Reedy River is over the road there. Even further north of downtown, there was some significant flooding issues with the Reedy River. And you'll notice as I kind of walk up here and take a look, you're looking at the actual river gauge here, the NOAA river gauge, that kind of tells us what the level of the river is. So in different flooding events, that has actually gotten damaged and had to be replaced. So a lot of water, fast moving water. This is why we tell people all the time, do not walk or drive through flooded roads. You don't know how deep that water is, what's in it, how fast it's moving. And if it's a road, you don't know if that road is even still there. So we are no strangers to flooding here in Greenville County, unfortunately. Again, flooding also damages the infrastructure, the roads and bridges, and that costs a lot of money to repair, and it takes some time to repair as well. So what can you do? Well, one of the things you can do is make sure you have multiple ways to receive information. You can go to our website, the State Emergency Management website, pay attention to local media. So your NBC stations, CBS, Fox Carolina, Greenville News, you want to pay attention to these local stations and their websites. We'll take a look at our social media accounts, the SC Emergency Manager app, which you can download, Code Red, and NOAA weather radios, and we're going to talk a little bit about what would Marty do. So this is our website, gceoc.com. We're actually in the process of upgrading this website, so probably the next month or so, you will see a brand new website that you'll have to go and check out. It'll still be the same address, gceoc.com. And social media, we are on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, so make sure you go and follow us at Greenville COEM is where you can follow us on social media. One of my favorite tools that I think everyone should have, every South Carolinian should have, is the SC Emergency Manager app. This is free in the App Store, Google Play. Just search SC Emergency Manager. This is the perfect tool to make your disaster plan for you and your family. A lot of cool things to check out. So you can download that again for free. You can make a plan. There's a supplies checklist. You can put your emergency contacts in here. Where the emergency meeting places are. You want to have a place both inside your neighborhood and outside your neighborhood. You can put your insurance information in here. There's even a checklist for your pets, any other important phone numbers you want to remember, and you can share your plan with other people. So you can see the checklist there where it talks about a flashlight, a first aid kit, food, water, medical records, all that kind of stuff. There's also a way to go ahead and submit damage assessment information on the app. You can take pictures of the damage to your property and send it in up to the State Emergency Management Division. So again, this is a really cool tool for you to download and check out. Anytime there are government closings and delays, that information will be in here. If you're deciding to take a trip to the coast, you'll be able to know what hurricane evacuation zone you are in, which is really important, especially during hurricane season. So fantastic app. I have it. I highly recommend every South Carolinian downloads this app. Code Red. We have Code Red in Greenville County, and it is free. If you just go to our website, gceoc.com, there's a logo there for Code Red. Go ahead and click on that, and you can put in either your email, your phone number to get a text message or a phone call to update you on any emergency situations in the county. Down at the bottom, you'll see alert types. Emergency notifications are already checked, but you can also check general notifications. But then there's an option for severe weather warnings. So you can get alerted for tornado warnings, severe thunderstorm warnings, and flash flood warnings. And they do this based on your address. So if there is some other area in the county, let's say you live in Greenville, but there's a warning for Simpsonville and the city of Greenville is not included. It's not going to warn you about what's going on in the city of Greenville. It's going to warn you about what's going on in Simpsonville only. So this is based on your address, a really cool tool to be able to be notified. Again, Recommend that you have multiple ways to get notified. Code Red is one, a NOAA weather radio is another. And also just general situational awareness, paying attention to what's going on with the weather forecast. And then we have What Would Marty Do? This is a new website that has been put on by floodplain management in Greenville County. And it's a good way to see what is going on and what you can do to prepare for these situations. So they've come up with a little bit of a mascot. This is Marty the mitigation moose, and he is trying to prevent things from happening. Build back better, prepare for these types of events, not just floods, but anything from winter storms to tornadoes, droughts, wildfires, earthquakes, even the pandemic. There's some ways to go ahead and be prepared for that. So what to do if you're under a flood warning, like how you should get to safety, how you can prepare for these types of events. Talking about flood insurance, Greenville County has been very proactive in dealing with repetitive flood loss properties. So buildings that continually flood every time we have a flood event. They have, between stormwater mitigation fees and grants, been able to buy out over 200 properties in the county and turn them back to green space. Nobody can build there anymore, and so that way there's not this repetitive loss of losing your home or your property. Talks about what you should do during a flood and what to do after a flood, and again, dealing with the infrastructure. It takes a long time to recover from these types of events. So What Would Marty Do is a good tool to be able to check out, especially for natural hazards and even the pandemic, about ways to stay safe and how to prepare, because the only thing harder than planning for a disaster is trying to explain why you didn't. And that is a phrase that we have up in our Emergency Operations Center to remind us how important it is and the work that we do and the planning that we do. So I'm going to go back in here real quick to the PowerPoint presentation. But there's a couple of other ways you can be prepared. You can take Greenville County Community Emergency Response Team training. We have a fall session going on now virtually. There will be another one in the spring. And what this training does is it educates people about disaster preparedness and the hazards that may impact their community. Some of these skills that you learn in here are fire safety, light search and rescue, team organization, and even some disaster medical operations. Again, we usually have about 2 training classes per year. And here's a look at the final exercise that they end up doing. And it's a good way to get involved with your community. It's a good way to learn to take care of not only yourself and your family, but also your neighbors too. And here's a look at my contact information. If you have any questions regarding flooding in Greenville County, feel free to give me a call or shoot me an email. Thank you.
Hello. Hi, I'm back, and I'm here to answer some questions from some of our panelists. I want to say we certainly learned a lot of good information. So without further ado, we will start our Q&A session. We have a first question. I guess it's for Graham. Graham, what can we do as residents to aid in overflow issues?
Right. Well, there's actually very little that as a resident you can do. The best thing you can do is notify ReWa about it. And you can go on our website, rewaonline.org, and find out our daytime number and our after hours number. The alternative to that is advising the local DHEC office that there is a sanitary sewer overflow from a manhole. One other thing to keep in mind, that if you live in a low-lying area and you have a basement that has facilities in it, whether it be a restroom or other sinks, things like that, you may want to consider putting a backflow device on the sewer line exiting your house so that sewage does not back up into your basement.
Unmute myself here. All right, we have another question. I guess anyone can answer this. In addition to torrential rains, is the flooding problem exacerbated by the growth in Greenville County and increased paving associated with development? If so, how can we better control that? Graham, you want to answer that? I mean,
Okay, I'll take that one. Obviously, as you have more impervious surfaces through driveways, more roads, more rooftops, rather than the rainwater infiltrating into the ground slowly, the water runs off much quicker. And you can see that, particularly in urbanized areas in Greenville County, if you're near a stream and you have a heavy, intense rainfall, you will see the streams rise very quickly. That is because we have an increase in impervious surfaces. The way to deal with that is through comprehensive stormwater management. The challenge there is we have a lot of entities that handle stormwater management. We have a number of municipalities, we have the county, and there needs to be adequate coordination to make sure that all these efforts are working together so that the impact of these heavy rains are mitigated.
thank you. Thank you. We have another question here. Someone is asking, how can one become a disaster volunteer?
I'm going to assume that one for me, and I love that question. The Red Cross right now is really strained. We have about 2,200 Red Cross volunteers in various parts of the country now between the wildfires and the hurricanes that have hit. Our volunteers are getting tired, so we would love to have new volunteers become disaster trained. So you can do that at our chapter. A lot of it has moved virtual, which is actually more convenient in a lot of ways. And we make it super easy to sign up. You go to redcross.org and there's a tab called Volunteer. And then you can search by your area or your chapter, and it brings up all the different kinds of volunteer opportunities. And one of them is disaster volunteer. Within disaster volunteer, there's all kinds of subcategories of that. Like you could become a shelter manager or learn how to do mass feeding operations. We're in need of mental health and people with some sort of medical training. So we'd love to have you do that.
Thanks. Thank you. I guess this next question would be for Jessica. What are the hot spots in Greenville for challenges?
So I feel like I get asked this question a lot, especially when the media is contacting me about different flooding stories and whatnot. And there's a couple of ways to answer this. One is going to be where the floodplain is. That is the area that's known to flood. It always floods. You can actually search to see if your property is in a floodplain. If you just Google FEMA floodplain maps, you'll be able to type in your address and see if your property is located in a floodplain. Obviously, anywhere where there's rivers, streams, lakes, any of that sort of thing, those are considered hot spots. But you'll notice, especially in downtown Greenville, Cleveland Park tends to close. Due to flooding. We'll get a lot of heavy rain and you'll notice the park will flood, so they'll go ahead and close down the park and portions of the Swamp Rabbit Trail because that is all in a floodplain right there. We do have some spots, and they're hard to tell exactly where they are, where you might have local drainage issues, where maybe debris gets caught in the storm drains and then it backs the water up over the road. So those kind of things happen in some areas, and it's hard to exactly pinpoint where that's going to happen because there's a couple of factors. It depends on how much rain has fallen, and in what period of time that rain has fallen. So the amount and the duration of the rainfall sometimes depends on where you're going to see a lot of those local drainage issues, and also where the rain falls. We might know it's going to flood in Greenville County, but can we pinpoint where that heaviest rain is going to fall during the shortest amount of time? That's the tough part.
Okay, thank you. We have another question. I guess this would be for Jessica again. In your role to reduce vulnerability and to prevent flooding, how do you work with community planners and agencies which oversee dams?
So we work very closely with the DHEC. DHEC regulates a lot of dams, and we have a lot of them in Greenville County. So they are in charge of regulating those dams, and what they require of dam owners is to each year produce a emergency action plan. So basically they are there residents downstream that would be affected by this? Are there roads that would be affected by this? And do they need to be evacuated? If so, they contact all the agencies that might be involved in having to deal with that. So they'll contact us, the sheriff's office or local police department. They'll contact the local fire department and whatnot, so that everybody's on the same page and knows, hey, this is our plan and this is what we anticipate happening if something should happen to this dam. So we have to coordinate with DHEC on that because they are the regulatory authority when it comes to that. But in general, in terms of reducing vulnerability and trying to prevent flooding, we work very closely with floodplain management within Greenville County. They have this program where they buy out properties that have repetitively flooded and turn them back into green space, and nobody can build there again. And they at this point have bought out over 200 properties and turned them back into green space. So very proactive on that front, making sure that we're, getting people out of harm's way that have this problem where they continuously flood.
Thank you. I guess we can take a couple more questions. So I'm just going to ask, this one is for Lisa. Given the exponential growth in Greenville County and the resulting increase in residential area flooding, can you tell us if you are seeing an increase in Greenville homes being damaged or destroyed by floodwaters? This is for Lisa.
I wouldn't say that we're seeing an increase, no. That hasn't been the case, although severe weather events, it seems like every expert is predicting that we can just start to see that more and more often. I mean, if Charleston is any indication, I don't know if Greenville is safe from severe weather events or not, but I can't say we've seen an uptick lately. We do see home fire spikes. They rise and fall with the weather, and they're fairly consistent, but not flooding at this point.
Thank you. Thanks. I have one more. I have one for Graham too. Someone sent in. Graham, this question also concerns growth in Greenville County. I know you talked about the 20-year plan going forward, but are there any plans to build more water treatment facilities as well? You talked about pump stations, but Greenville just seems, just even in Jessica's presentation, in between her statistic from 18 and 19, we have lots and lots of people moving here.
Right, and that's a good question, Jenny. Greenville County just completed its comprehensive land use plan, and out of that plan, they are projecting 200,000 more people, or they're expected to move into Greenville County over the next 20 years. In concert with the development of that plan, ReWa did what is called the Upstate Roundtable, which is a planning document that took a lot of the same information that came out of the comprehensive land use plan and then detailed what impact it would have on our sewer system, not only in terms of existing capacities, but also having to run new facilities. So to answer your question, yes, we are projecting to build more trunk lines, more pump stations, possibly more treatment facilities. It's estimated over the next 10 years that we're going to spend close to about $500 million to $750 million in infrastructure investment, whether that's upsizing and improving existing facilities or actually putting in new facilities.
Thank you, thank you. And I guess we'll take one more question. Someone asked, are any of the speakers familiar enough with Unity Park and the plans there to know whether or not the river design features that are going on there will help mitigate some of the flooding there?
I can take that one just with the small amount of knowledge that I do know, because that is within the city of Greenville. Unity Park, that area is a floodplain. So they are trying to allow that to still be, water to run where it needs to run. However, from what I understand, they are looking at doing some work on the river to try to mitigate some of that flooding in that area. I've spoken with some of their public works folks about this as recent as last week. So I don't know what exactly those plans look like and what exactly they are going to do, but it is something they are looking to address.
All right, well, thank you very much, everyone. This has been very, very informative. And now we will hear from Tommy Reese, who is the Education Committee Chair. Thank you all very, very much.
Good evening. I hope you all are applauding at home, even though our speakers won't be able to hear that or see our standing ovations. I am Tommy Reese, the chair of our education committee, which has brought to you this outstanding program tonight. I'd like to thank the entire committee, especially Jenny Mitchell and Susan Robbins, who coordinated this program for us. They truly deserve our gratitude for arranging and rearranging this program for Zoom to bring us this whole entire evening. A huge Greenville Women Giving thank you to each of our speakers. Thank you so much for going beyond our initial request to not only present to us, but to pre-record your presentation and also be with us this evening to answer questions. We do appreciate your making this program possible for us. A special thanks to Melanie Dixon, our guru of Zoom, for directing and producing this event for us. She made it possible for all of us to Zoom together tonight. And coming up, our next education session will be on Wednesday, October 21st at 11:30, a midday program, also via Zoom. You will receive invitations soon for our education focus this year, whatever it takes, eliminating barriers to ensure student success in Greenville County. We'll hear success stories from On Track Greenville, now 5 years old, and what their future plans. Thank you for joining us tonight. Have a great evening.